I spent 31 years sitting at tables where everyone laughed in a language I couldn't follow. Married to a woman who swore I was part of the family. It took one night at a Greek club to understand I'd only ever been a polite guest in my own marriage. My name is David Miller. I'm 54, American, and until recently I'd been married to my Greek-American wife, Lydia, for 31 years. On paper, we looked like the success story people post online. For grown kids doing fine. A paid-off house in a quiet neighborhood. I've worked in a technical field my whole life. Steady, boring, reliable. We did the church thing, the family vacations, the birthday parties with too much cake and not enough chairs. If you squinted from the outside, we were solid. The part you wouldn't see is this. For 3 decades, I lived as a permanent visitor in my own marriage. Lydia's world was Greek church, Greek festivals, Greek social clubs. Old ladies kissing both her cheeks. Guys greeting her with inside jokes from summers in the village. Everyone slid in and out of Greek and English like it was nothing. I'd sit there, smiling, catching maybe every 5th word when they switched back to English, then losing the thread the moment the Greek kicked in again. I tried. God knows I tried. I downloaded every language app that promised miracles in 15 minutes a day. I bought phrasebooks and highlighted them like a college kid. I watched YouTube videos of some cheerful guy breaking down the alphabet while I repeated sounds that felt like they got stuck in my throat. I could order a coffee, say good morning, and ask how someone was doing. After that, I was done. The rest of the sentence crashed and burned. At first, it was almost a running joke. I'd mispronounce something, everyone would laugh, and Lydia would squeeze my hand and tell me how cute my accent was. I played along. Being a good sport was easier than admitting how stupid I felt. Over time, the joke stopped being funny. Lydia's pride in her heritage used to be something I admired. She'd talk about her grandparents coming over with nothing, about keeping traditions alive, about how important it was that our kids know where they come from. I agreed. I backed her up. I drove to events, stood in kitchens, carried trays, and did grunt work. But somewhere along the way, that pride turned into a measuring stick. Comments started slipping in. You'd get it if you spoke Greek. It's hard to explain in English. You really should know this by now. Nothing brutal, nothing you could quote as abusive. Just little cuts over years, telling me I wasn't quite enough. I went from being the husband who supports her culture to the husband who never quite fits in. I felt it every time someone cracked a joke in Greek. Everyone roared, and Lydia half-translated it to me in 2 dry words that landed flat. The real version stayed with them. I got the diet version. That's the quiet shame nobody saw. Sitting at tables full of people who supposedly loved me, feeling like the extra chair. Smiling, nodding, pretending it didn't bother me that my own wife's real personality seemed to live in a language I couldn't reach. That crack between her world and mine didn't show up in any family photos. But that's the crack everything eventually fell through. That night at the Greek club didn't start any different from the 100 before it. I drove like usual. Lydia sat in the passenger seat scrolling her phone, touching up her lipstick in the mirror. I cracked my standard joke about how I was going to order something off the menu I couldn't pronounce and probably end up with boiled goat. She gave me the polite little laugh she gives when she's half listening. The parking lot was already packed. I could hear the music before we even opened the door. Clarinets, that rolling rhythm that makes everyone else's shoulders sway and my feet lock up. Inside, it was the usual parade. Older ladies kissing Lydia on both cheeks, calling her Cory Mao, my girl. Men clapped her on the back, asking about her parents, her cousins, who were in town from Greece this year. Names, stories, memories flying around in Greek. I caught Lydia, America, and children. That was about it. We took our usual seats, her against the wall, me beside her, half in the conversation, half out. People sat down, stood up, rotated through like we were at base camp. English for a sentence or two, then a hard turn into Greek. I hung onto the English parts like handrails on a moving train. Normally, Lydia would anchor me. She'd lean over, give me the gist, throw me a line so I wasn't completely adrift. He's talking about his son. She's complaining about her knee. Little summaries that let me nod at the right time. That night, something shifted. The club photographer, Nick Marino, slid into the chair on Lydia's other side. I knew him in the "hey man, how's it going" way. Late 40s, maybe. Dark hair, camera always hanging off his shoulder. One of those guys who looks like he's perpetually about to tell a joke. He greeted me in English. "Hey David. Good to see you, man." Then he turned to Lydia and flipped to Greek like someone hit a switch. She lit up. I don't mean she smiled. I mean her whole face changed. Her posture straightened. Her hands started flying when she talked. Her laugh got louder, younger. They went back and forth in rapid-fire Greek, overlapping, interrupting, teasing. It was like watching her plug into a power source I didn't have access to. Every now and then I'd hear my name dropped into the stream, David, followed by a wave of laughter. I'd force a smile, wait for the translation that never came. Lydia would glance at me, pat my leg once, then go right back under. I sat there, technically, ring on my finger, her bag by my chair. But the more they talked, the more I felt myself being pushed to the edge of my own life. An extra chair at the table. A guy who drove her there. I'd always been the outsider at those events. But until that night, it felt harmless. Background noise. Culture stuff. This time, watching Lydia lean in toward Nick, eyes bright, talking in the language where she really lived, I understood something I didn't want to admit. In her world, in her language, I was optional. The shift really started once the music got louder. Plates hit the table, moussaka, lamb, salads, bread. People were topping off glasses, shouting across to other tables. The band kicked into one of those songs everyone seems to know by instinct. Chairs scraped back. A few of the women stood, already forming that curved line they always make for the dances. Nick stood up first. He turned to Lydia and held out his hand. "Ella, come on," he said. No English this time. Just that easy command like they'd done this 100 times. She didn't look at me. Didn't ask, "You want to dance?" Didn't even do the courtesy glance a married woman gives her husband before she disappears for a while. She just went. 1 second she was sitting beside me, the next she was in that line, her hand in Nick's, the two of them stepping in sync like they'd practiced for weeks. The kicks, the turns, the claps right on the beat. I tried to learn those steps a dozen times. I always ended up half a beat behind, crashing into someone's shoulder, sweating and apologizing. From my chair, it looked effortless. For them, I sat there with my plate untouched, fork in my hand, watching my wife move around the room with a man who knew the rhythm, the cues, the inside jokes they shouted over the music in Greek. At one point, I tried to join a conversation at the table. I leaned in, caught maybe 2 English words, then they veered back into Greek. I opened my mouth to ask what they were talking about and Lydia's cousin cut me off with a quick, "I'll explain later, David," before turning away and laughing at something I didn't hear. Later never came. By the time the band shifted into another song and I finally walked over to Lydia to ask when she wanted to head home, I wasn't just tired. I was humiliated. And the way she looked at me, annoyed, distracted, like I was interrupting something more important, told me exactly where I ranked in that room. I caught up to her near the edge of the dance floor, where the music was still loud enough to swallow most protests. "Hey," I said, touching her elbow. "When do you want to head out? I've got an early start tomorrow." She didn't even fully turn toward me. Eyes still on the room, cheeks flushed. She tossed out, 15 minutes. I just need to say goodbye to a few people." The tone wasn't wife to husband. It was a parent to impatient kid. Then she slipped away again. I went back to the table, checked my watch. 10 minutes, 15, 20. I did a lap around the hall, peeked into the little sidebar, checked near the bathrooms, asked one of the older ladies in my broken phrases if she'd seen Lydia. I got a shrug, a stream of Greek, and a pat on the arm. 30 minutes became an hour. The music shifted, people started grabbing coats. Couples left in pairs, leaning into each other, laughing their way out into the cold. My calls went straight to voicemail. Text stayed on delivered. There's a specific kind of humiliation in standing in a doorway scanning faces, realizing the one you're looking for isn't there, and maybe hasn't been for a while. At some point I walked out to the car because I didn't know what else to do. I sat there in the driver's seat, watching the doors, headlights flashing across my windshield as people pulled out and went home to live where both partners got in the same vehicle. I waited until the lot was mostly empty. Then I drove home alone. On the way, I rehearsed the argument we were going to have, the questions I'd ask, the lines I'd draw. But underneath all that, another voice kept whispering the same thing it always did. Maybe this is your fault. Maybe if you'd learned the language, you'd be with her right now. By dawn, I was on our balcony, coffee gone cold in my hand, heartbeat loud in my ears, staring at the parking lot below, waiting to see what version of my wife stepped out of a car at 5:30 in the morning. I saw the headlights first. The car rolled slowly, like it had all the time in the world. I leaned on the balcony rail and watched Lydia get out of the passenger seat, smoothing her dress, laughing at something the driver said. It was Nick. He had one hand on the wheel, one arm hanging out the window, easy and relaxed. He didn't look like a man dropping off a married woman who'd left her husband at a club 6 hours earlier. He looked like a guy finishing a good night. Lydia shut the door, bent down to say something through the window, both of them still smiling. Then the car pulled away. No hurry, no guilt I could see. I met her at the door. She came in flushed, smelling like smoke and ouzo and someone else's car. Her hair was a little messier, lipstick faded. She kicked off her shoes, saw me standing there, and rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, David. Don't start. I hadn't said a word yet. Where were you? I asked. My voice came out calmer than I felt. Why did you leave without me? Why didn't you answer your phone? She threw her hands up, like I was being ridiculous. I was with people from the club. We were talking, networking, culture, something you've never really understood. 6 hours, I said. You told me 15 minutes ago. It got late. We were in deep conversation. She snapped back. We were discussing community events, funding, and the next festival. This is important, David. You think everything is just dancing and food. I stared at her. You disappeared. You left me alone at a public event. No word, no text. Do you understand how that looks? How does that feel? She folded her arms. Defensive. You're overreacting. This is what bothers me. You're always so sensitive about my culture. Just because you don't speak Greek doesn't mean I have to limit my life to what you understand. There it was. This isn't about Greek, I said. This is about respect. You left your husband behind and went off with another man until 5:30 in the morning. Her eyes flashed. Nothing happened with Nick. He was just nice enough to drive me home. You really have such a small, jealous mind sometimes. You always have. You stand there like a tourist, watching, never participating, and then you judge everything. Something in me clicked, or snapped. Hard to say. For 31 years I'd been the guy who swallowed it. The one who told myself I was overthinking. The one who tried to be supportive instead of admitting I was hurt. Not this time. So let me get this straight, I said. You vanish for hours, blow off my calls, come home in another man's car at sunrise, and somehow I'm the problem because I don't speak Greek? She hesitated for half a second. Then she doubled down. You don't get what these events mean, David. You never have. Supporting isn't the same as participating. You've always stayed on the outside. That's your choice. That was the moment I knew we were done. Not because of the night. Not because of Nick. Because my wife looked me in the eye and made it clear she didn't see anything wrong with treating me like a piece of furniture that drove her to and from her real life. Okay, I said quietly. She blinked. Okay, what? I'm going to stay somewhere else for a while. I walked past her, into our bedroom, pulled out a duffel bag, and started throwing in shirts and jeans with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, from adrenaline, from finally drawing a line after 3 decades of erasing myself. David, don't be dramatic, she called from the hallway. We can talk about this when you calm down. I zipped the bag, looked around the room we'd shared for most of our lives. The framed wedding photo, the church icons her mother insisted we hang. My side of the closet that never quite looked like it belonged. This isn't me calming down, I said. walking past her with the bag over my shoulder. This is me finally waking up. The door closed behind me with a soft click. And I knew, even if we pretended otherwise later, that I hadn't just left the house for a cooling-off break. I'd stepped over a line we were probably never coming back from. The first few nights, I slept on my buddy Mark's couch. He didn't ask a lot of questions. Just handed me a blanket, pointed at the bathroom, and left a cold beer on the coffee table. Sometimes that's all a man needs. Space, silence, and someone who doesn't rush to fill it. My phone lit up the first night. 10 missed calls. Then texts. Where are you? We need to talk. You're blowing this out of proportion. By day 3, the tone shifted. I can't believe you left over nothing. Do you have any idea how this looks for me? You're making me look bad in the community. Not once. I'm sorry I left you. Not once. I see how that hurt you. The kids were diplomatic. They're adults now with their own lives, their own problems. Dad, we love you both. My oldest said over the phone. We don't want to take sides. I didn't ask them to. I sat in a lawyer's office a week later, feeling like a man describing someone else's life. Walk me through that night, she said, pen ready. So I did. The club, the dancing, the 15 minutes, the 6 hours, the unanswered calls, the 5:30 a.m. drop-off in another man's car. Saying it out loud made it sound worse, not better. She nodded, professional, steady. What you're describing fits under abandonment of marital duties and potentially emotional infidelity, she said. Combined with the lack of remorse and ongoing blame, we're solid on irreconcilable differences. Hearing those words attached to my marriage felt like swallowing gravel. I hesitated when she slid the papers over. 31 years in a stack less than half an inch thick. My thumb rested on the signature line. This is where the movie version of me waits for an apology, for a grand gesture, for some dramatic realization. Real life's uglier and quieter. What finally made my hand move wasn't anger. It was the realization that Lydia was more offended than anyone might question her behavior than she was by the idea of losing her husband. I signed. Serving her the papers was a formality handled by someone else. I heard about the fallout through mutual friends and the kids. He's punishing me for being Greek. He never accepted my culture. He couldn't handle a strong woman with her own life. I didn't correct the story, didn't show up to defend myself. By then, the anger had burned off, leaving something heavier behind. Exhaustion, the kind that goes deeper than sleep. The kind you get from spending 3 decades trying to be enough in a place you were never really allowed to belong. The court isn't built for emotion. It's built for sequence and proof. I sat across from Lydia at that long table, a pitcher of water between us like a neutral country. She was dressed sharp, hair perfect, chin high. If you didn't know better, you'd think she was there on business, not fighting for the version of our life she wanted on record. Her lawyer went first. He called that night cultural engagement. Said Lydia was heavily involved in community work, that events often extended late into the evening, that my limited cultural participation created tension and misunderstanding. Clean phrases that made my anger sound unsophisticated. My lawyer didn't bother dressing it up. She laid out the texts, the call logs, the timestamps, showed the judge the photos from the event, the posts on social media, the smiling shots of Lydia and Nick at 1:42 a.m. while my calls went unanswered. Mr. Miller, the judge said, turning to me, is it correct that your wife left the event without informing you and returned home in another man's vehicle at approximately 5:30 a.m.? Yes, Your Honor. And prior to this, you were unable to reach her for several hours? Yes, Your Honor. No screaming. No dramatic confessions. Just facts landing like hammers. The strange part was outside the courtroom. At Greek church, in the weeks before things wrapped up, people I barely knew started nodding to me with this formal, quiet respect. Men I'd shaken hands with for years, nothing more, came up to me and said things like, "We saw what happened that night." Or, "You were always good to her, David." They didn't say it out loud. They didn't say it in front of her. But they said it. It turned out all those years of me showing up, keeping my mouth shut, never mocking their food, their traditions, their habits. It had earned me more goodwill than either of us realized. Lydia must have felt it. The sideways glances. The conversations that shifted when she walked up. The fact that her punished for being Greek story didn't land as hard as she'd hoped. In the end, the judge split it clean. I got the house. We shared holidays in a formal rotation. Assets divided, accounts separated. 3 decades of life reduced to numbers and signatures. Walking out into the parking lot with that stack of papers under my arm, I felt like I'd both won and lost. I had the house, the respect, the legal acknowledgement that what happened wasn't okay. But I was also a man standing next to an empty car, holding proof of something I'd never really wanted to be right about. 2 years later, it happened in the most ordinary place possible. Grocery store on a Saturday. Fluorescent lights, slow carts, some kid crying 3 aisles over. I was in the cereal section with Emily, arguing about whether I actually liked the healthy stuff I'd convinced myself to buy for years. "You always get this one," she said, tapping the box. "I got that one because your predecessor thought sugar was a moral failure," I said. "I actually hate it." She laughed, that easy laugh that doesn't check the room first, and squeezed my arm. "Then get what you like, David. Life's short. Buy the stupid cereal." I was still smiling when I saw her. Lydia turned the corner at the end of the aisle, pushing a cart with 3 things in it: yogurt, coffee, and a bag of imported Greek pasta. She froze when she saw us. It wasn't dramatic, just a half second where everything in her face went blank. Then she put on the polite mask I knew too well. "David," she said. "Hi." "Hey, Lydia," I answered. My voice sounded steady. Surprised me. Emily glanced between us, then gave Lydia a warm, neutral smile. "Hi, I'm Emily." They shook hands. Lydia's eyes took in the picture fast. My relaxed shoulders, Emily's hand resting lightly on my arm, the way I wasn't scanning the room for an exit. "How are you?" Lydia asked. "I'm well," I said. And it was true. Quiet, simple, not a performance. She told me about her authentic Greek apartment downtown, mentioned a couple of cultural events she was helping organize. Her words were proud, but there was something tired around her eyes. A hollowness the makeup couldn't cover. We kept it short. No rehashing. No digs. "Good to see you," I said finally. "You too," she replied, and I could tell she meant it and hated that she meant it. Emily and I pushed our cart away, turning the corner together. As we left the aisle, she bumped my shoulder lightly. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, surprising myself again with how much I meant it. "Yeah, I'm good." Grief, relief, and something steadier all sat together in my chest. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in a life that fit me, not a role I was still auditioning for. I'm sitting in my living room while I tell you this. It's quiet in that good way, not the heavy, dead kind I used to know. There's a half-finished coffee on the table. I'll forget about it until it's cold, then drink it anyway. Old habits. On the mantle, there are photos of the kids. Not arranged by some big plan, just added as life happened. School pictures. Graduation caps. A shot of all of us on the back porch last summer. Squinting into the sun. My youngest holding the dog like it's a football. They come by when they can. They don't ask us to sit on opposite sides of the room anymore. Time did some of the healing there. Silence did the rest. Down the hall, I can hear Emily and my son laughing about something. Their voices blend. No edge, no walking on eggshells. Just normal human noise. You don't realize how rare that is until you've spent years listening for the next thing that will turn into a fight. People ask sometimes if I hate Lydia now. The answer is no. What I feel is more complicated. There's history there. For kids. 31 Christmases minus a couple. Road trips. Inside jokes that still pop up in my head when I pass certain places. You don't erase that. You fold it. You file it. You stop letting it run the show. But I won't pretend it didn't break something in me to realize how low I was on her priority list that night, and how fast she turned the story into my cultural insecurity instead of her disrespect. Here's the truth I had to choke down. That night at the club didn't create the problem. It exposed it. The real damage was built slowly over decades. Comment here, an eye roll there. You wouldn't understand. It's Greek. Jokes about how I never really got it. Her whole personality turned brighter and sharper when she was around her people, then dimming down to something calmer and more practical at home. I told myself it was fine, that every couple has a split life, home life, social life, work life. I said I was being supportive, that this was what a good husband does. Shows up, smiles, carries trays, pays bills, keeps his mouth shut. What I was really doing was shrinking. I delayed learning the language until it became a running joke instead of an honest effort. I avoided saying, "This makes me feel excluded," because I didn't want to be the needy husband who couldn't handle his wife having her own world. I let things slide that I should have stopped dead in their tracks. I made my own feelings optional to keep the peace. That's on me. But some things aren't on me, and I won't carry them anymore. Culture is not a hall pass for cruelty. Heritage doesn't excuse disappearing with another man until sunrise. Community work isn't a magic spell that turns your husband into a piece of furniture you can leave behind without a word. Respect isn't Greek or American. It's basic. If your partner is standing alone in a parking lot, wondering where the hell you are, there's something wrong, no matter what flag you wave or what church you attend. One thing that surprised me after the divorce was the Greek community itself. For years, I felt like a prop there. The American husband, the quiet guy at the edge of the table, the one who smiled and nodded through conversations he half understood. I thought they barely saw me. Turns out they did. In court, church, in the grocery store, little comments, short conversations, men pulling me aside to say, "We saw how she treated you that night," or, "You were always respectful, David." No drama. No speeches, just a steady signal you weren't crazy. We noticed. That mattered more than I expected. Because for a long time, I bought into Lydia's version of the story. That I was small, jealous, intimidated by her real world. It took other people quietly disagreeing with that narrative for me to understand how twisted it was. So what did I actually lose? I lost a marriage where I was never fully at the center. I lost the illusion that if I just tried a little harder, learned a little more, kept my head down a little longer, I'd finally graduate from almost belong to actually belonging. And what did I gain? I gained a life that fits. A woman who doesn't need me to pass a cultural entrance exam to be worthy of respect. A home where the jokes don't need subtitles. A version of myself that doesn't apologize for existing outside someone else's script. Emily isn't Greek. She doesn't know the dances. She butchers the few Greek words she's heard. And you know what? None of that matters. Because when we walk into a room together, I don't feel like an accessory to her identity. I feel like her man. Full stop. If there's anything I want you to take from this, it's simple. You can respect someone's culture without erasing yourself to honor it. You can love a woman and still walk away when she treats your presence in her life like a background setting instead of a foundation. You are not weak for wanting to belong, but you are lost if you keep begging for it in a place that loves your compliance more than your character. So if you ever find yourself again at that table, everyone laughing in a language you don't speak, your own wife shining for everyone but you, don't just ask, "How do I fit in better?" Ask the harder question. Is there actually a place for me here? Or have I been living as a well-mannered guest in my own damn life?
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.